This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
You're welcome back to the conversations. We now turn to the Budget Office. The federal government says that the release of the 2024 Budget Implementation Report has been pushed back to allow for a complete verification of projects and the transition to an extended fiscal framework. A statement from the Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, Tanimu Yakubu, explained that a provisional report will be released this month of September together with a report on the first half of 2025, which is also overdue. Joining the conversation is Vayala Kwaga, Group Head of Research and Policy Advisory at Budget. Mr. Kwaga, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
I'm delighted to be here as always. Good morning.
Right. What do you make of the Budget Office explanation?
So the Budget Office explanation is frankly too little too late. This is approximately, you can view it in this way, approximately one fiscal year, no budget implementation report. We did not have one for Q3 2024, Q4 2024, Q1 2025, and Q2 2025. And it's worrisome that if civil society and the media had not basically caused an uproar in this non-adherence to established legislation, that the Budget Office would have also kept silent. It's counterfactual if you want to investigate it, but it's not clear that the Budget Office of the Federation would have provided any form of explanation for its unwillingness or refusal to publish these very important fiscal documents. I think that the explanations given, maybe we'll get to that in the course of this interview, but the explanations given are difficult to understand based on what we know about public financial management, what we know about the federal government's existing interventions, and what we even know about what the federal government, through the president, had said about its level of implementation last year. So, a lot just remains to be seen.
Right. So, Mr. Kwaga, let's talk about, before we get to those reasons that have been listed, let's talk about why or what is at stake. Given that the Budget Office has missed these, I don't know if you'd call them regulatory or traditional timelines for publishing the reports, why is it important that they stuck to it in the first place?
So it's important that a government obeys its own laws, firstly, as a demonstration that the rule of law is an actual day-to-day principle of government. No government should expect any form of trust in its administration or in its policy implementation if it itself cannot be held bound by its own legislation and does so when it feels like. That's number one. Number two, it's important because providing these documents play a key function in upholding transparency. Transparency is a principle, or should be a principle, of any democratically elected government, to show that it is willing to be open, it is willing to show its inner workings, and is willing to provide accessible information in a timely and organized manner. Thirdly, for purposes of accountability, where the government in its decision-making is willing to be answerable for the decisions or for the past or present decisions that it is making, and it is willing to be responsible for those decisions. So those very primary elements of what a government should be, I think, depict the importance of budget implementation reports and their timely publication. I would go a little more further to the business or commercial component. In most developed countries, transparency and accountability were driven by the private sector towards the government, because the private sector ordinarily responds to signals from the government that can tell it where the government's major investments will go to, so the private sector can know how it will react and how it will make its investment and how it will, implement its own business practices, as a means to stimulate the economy. But in Nigeria, the reverse seems to be the case now, where the government is basically keeping silent, and businesses are even unsure. I mean, there's also the side issue of contractors complaining that they had not been paid. A couple of, maybe I think it was last month, some even going on a peaceful protest march that they had not paid. So I think these are some importances that can be clearly gleaned from this situation.
So if we quickly explore the further detailing of the reason given by the Budget Office, they've identified two things: verification and reconciliation processes. And, the head of the Budget Office says that it's not just about an accounting summary. There needs to be a physical verification of the projects. And then he goes further to talk about the extension of the fiscal framework that we're implementing, and how if they had published as and when due, it would have been outdated and conflicting data sets. It takes us back to, I guess, in many ways, a ripple impact of this extension of the capital component of our budget, first in 2023, then we saw in 2024, right? So I'm coming back to his explanation and whether it makes sense, and also what it means for the federal government itself and these projects, that if they're saying there's a delay, one is tempted to think that it means the projects have not actually been completed in the cycle that they should have been completed in.
Yes, I mean, I totally agree with you. And let me just establish this premise. The project implementation reports are not just comments about capital expenditure. There are comments about personnel expenditure. There are comments about overhead expenditure. There are comments about debt management. There are comments also about revenue generation. So making the budget implementation reports seem like they are only about reporting on capital expenditure, I think is somewhat unfair, and I don't want to say misleading, because I want to assume the Budget Office of the Federation, has the country's interest at heart. But I'm struggling to understand why the picture is being painted as if it's only about capital expenditure. Yes, the previous administration may have embarked on a large number of projects, and verification definitely takes time. I mean, it even calls into question that if this administration is so concerned about fiscal verification, then what have previous administrations been doing about fiscal verification of their capital projects, which, by the way, tend not to be reported in detail, even in budget implementation reports. So I think that's a separate issue that sometime in the future really needs to be raised. But his statement that budget implementation reports are not accounting summaries, I think is very dismissive. The idea is for Nigerians and for the wider international community to know how much the government is spending, how much the government is earning, how well the government is managing its debt. These are key issues that I do not think we have to wait a year before we are given a provisional explanation on what happened in the 2024 fiscal year. Besides, the president himself, in his budget speech of 2025, attested to the capital component of the budget nearing 70 to 80% completion. So was it that it was not properly understood at that time, and now the story is changing? What changed between December of 2024 and August of now that could not have been said in January or February or March of 2025? So there's a lot that really, this kind of leaves more unanswered questions, than providing a cover-all explanation, in my view.
Mr. Kwaga, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. That was Vayala Kwaga. The conversation today focusing on the federal government announcing that it has delayed the 2024 budget implementation reports to ensure physical verification. You're still listening to Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos, your Beyond the News station. Here on Now Breakfast, in just a short moment, we'll be turning to the markets, specifically Naira and Kobo, where we tell you what Nigerians are spending and how they are spending it on much needed goods and services.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.